The Three Cherry Stones by Alfred H Miles. Many years ago, three young gentlemen were lingering over their fruit and wine at a tavern, when a man of middle age entered the room, seated himself at a small unoccupied table, and calling the waiter, ordered a simple meal. His appearance was not such as to arrest attention. His hair was thin and grey, the expression of his countenance was sedate, with a slight touch perhaps of melancholy, and he wore a grey surtout with a standing collar, which manifestly had seen service, if the wearer had not. The stranger continued his meal in silence, without lifting his eyes from the table, until a cherry stone, sportively snapped from the thumb and finger of one of the gentlemen, struck him upon his right ear. His eye was instantly upon the aggressor, and his ready intelligence gathered from the ill-suppressed merriment of the party that this petty impertinence was intentional. The stranger stooped and picked up the cherry stone, and a scarcely perceptible smile passed over his features as he carefully wrapped it in a piece of paper and placed it in his pocket. This singular procedure upset the gravity of the young gentleman entirely, and a burst of laughter proceeded from the group. Unmoved by this rudeness, the stranger continued his frugal repast until another cherry stone from the same hand struck him upon the right elbow. This also, to the infinite amusement of the party, he picked from the floor and carefully deposited with the first. Amidst shouts of laughter, a third cherry stone was soon after discharged, and struck the stranger upon the left breast. This also he very deliberately deposited with the other two. As he rose and was engaged in paying for his repast, the gaiety of these sporting gentlemen became slightly subdued. Having discharged his reckoning, he walked to the table at which the young men were sitting, and with that air of dignified calmness which is 1,000 times more terrible than wrath, drew a card from his pocket, and presented it with perfect civility to the offender, who could do no other than offer his in return. While the stranger unclosed his surtout to take the card from his pocket, he displayed the undress coat of a military man. The card disclosed his rank, and a brief inquiry at the bar was sufficient for the rest. He was a captain whom ill health and long service had entitled to half pay. In earlier life he had been engaged in several affairs of honour, and in the dialect of the fancy, was a dead shot. The next morning a note arrived at the aggressor's residence, containing a challenge in form and one of the cherry stones. The truth then flashed before the challenged party. It was the challenger's intention to make 3 bites at this cherry, 3 separate affairs out of this unwarrantable frolic. The challenge was accepted, and the challenged party, in deference to the challenger's reputed skill with the pistol, had half decided upon the small sword. But his friends, who were on the alert, soon discovered that the captain, who had risen by his merit, had in the earlier days of his necessity gained his bread as an accomplished instructor in the use of that weapon. They met and fired alternately by lot. The young man had selected this mode, thinking he might win the first fire. He did, fired and missed his opponent. The captain levelled his pistol and fired. The ball passed through the flap of the right ear, and as the wounded man involuntarily put his hand to the place, he remembered that it was the right ear of his antagonist that the first cherry stone had struck. Here ended the first lesson. A month passed. His friends cherished the hope that he would hear nothing more from the captain when another note, a challenge of course, and another cherry stone arrived with an apology on the score of ill health for delay. Again they met, fired simultaneously, and the captain, who was unhurt, shattered the right elbow of his antagonist, the very point upon which he had been struck with the second cherry stone, and here ended the second lesson. There was something awfully impressive in the modus operandi and exquisite skill of his antagonist. The third cherry stone was still in his possession, and the aggressor had not forgotten that it had struck the unoffending gentleman upon the left breast. A month passed, another, and another of terrible suspense, but nothing was heard from the captain. At length the gentleman who had been his second in the former duels once more presented himself, and tendered another note, which, as the recipient perceived on taking it, contained the last of the cherry stones. The note was superscribed in the captain's well-known hand, but it was the writing evidently of one who wrote feebly. There was an unusual solemnity also in the manner of him who delivered it. The seal was broken, and there was the cherry stone in a blank envelope. "And what, sir, am I to understand by this?" inquired the aggressor. "You will understand, sir, that my friend forgives you. He is dead."